One of the biggest complaints I hear from ground mains, minus the audio, is the use of fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft in War Thunder, especially in ground RB. Now, I actually kind of start to understand what these guys complain about. Me, obviously, as an air main, has spent the last year mostly playing ground. And honestly, I've kind of come to the understanding of what these players feel like. In air RB, if you're wanting to play out, say, an F5, you are going to be going up against enemy aircraft. You're not going to have interference from anything else, minus enemy aircraft. Occasionally, the SPAA systems that spawn in sim maps, or the SPAA systems at enemy airfields. Now, if you want to play tanks, you're going to be competing against fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft and helicopters. That's just not necessarily fair, and I understand the argument, because everything has its own standalone game mode except for ground RB, or for ground players. Even in arcade, you can get the freaking A10 in ground arcade at like 8.0 or something incredibly low. Obviously it's per chance, but that's still just insane to me. And I'm starting to actually think that Gaijin should have a game mode that is just for tanks. This would allow players to focus on tank v tank gameplay and would help them out in a lot of ways. I think a big one alone would just be able to change the lineups that players bring into the game. Right now, if you have a fully sized tank lineup in ground RB, you're going to be having to bring a lot of different things to counter aircraft. Most players I see bring an SPAA, they bring a fighter aircraft, and then they also bring something like a infantry fighting vehicle that has access to a gun that can bring down aircraft. Compared to players that would be playing tank v tank only, suddenly you can focus on a lineup that's like, hey, we're going to bring an Abrams, we're going to bring a Wolfpack, we're going to bring a Bradley, we're not going to bring a Lavad, we're not going to bring anything to counter aircraft, because there's no aircraft. We don't have to focus on the SPA, we don't have to focus on another fixed-wing fighter to go after enemy strike fighters. You can focus on just the tank v tank gameplay. I personally, right now, think what Gaijin should do is leave ground RB how it is, but then add an additional game mode. Possibly rework what ground RB is now and rework this into some form of mixed battles, maybe call it mixed or whatever they want to end up calling it, and it be the same layout now. But then introducing something called ground realistic battles, that obviously was what we have, but have it be tank v tank only. I understand for a lot of players, they don't understand why ground mains complain so much. And I used to be in the same boat. I used to think that players that would complain about lack of aircraft didn't really know what they were talking about. There's obviously a lot of cons if you remove aircraft from ground RB just in its entirety. And I want to go over that. Obviously, one, even when players complain about CAS, they have to remember something. Aircraft help your team out too. Even if you don't have a great player, that level 20 F4 player with 2,000-pound bombs that just suicided the camper who's been spawn camping you guys for the past entire 20 minutes of the match, well, now that's no longer an issue. And you gotta remember that tanks can get into a spot where it's gonna be pretty much near impossible for other tanks to combat them. And that is where having something like a fully kitted Su-25 or A-10 comes in very handy. I also do understand what the normal ground player complaint is. They'd rather have to try to figure out how to take out that tank than have to deal with missile spam. And I also agree with that statement. Keep in mind that there are aircraft now like the Jazz 39E that can carry, I believe it's 16 Spice 250s. They can carry Brimstones. Russia still has the KH-38. And if you don't have a competent SPAA player, that's going to be hard to counter. And even with a competent SPAA player, keep in mind, aircraft still do, in my opinion, have an upper hand. Now, this obviously is going to change as we get more systems in the game. Gaijin's already said we're going to be getting the Patriot and probably the S-400 system. Yes, that is also going to arrive as we get the anti-radiation missiles. But if Gaijin models the anti-radiation missiles how they did in the past event, they really are not going to be that big of a threat. Yes, Gaijin did say those were not final, but I'm not too hopeful nonetheless. Anyways, I want to know what your guys' thoughts are down below in the comments. If you guys are air mains, I would imagine you don't really have a bone to pick in this fight. If you guys are ground mains who also understand the importance of enemy aircraft, or not even of enemy, but of aircraft in ground RB, you also might not fully get my point. But I know there's a lot of ground players who just want to play tanks. They don't want to have to deal with aircraft. And I hope that some of you guys have made it this far in the video to kind of, hear that, because I don't want to stress it enough. War Thunder is a game of opinions. If you love the game and you love playing aircraft and ground derby, you're not going to want to ever change. And if you're a tanker that doesn't, want to deal with enemy fighters or enemy strike aircraft, which is completely understandable, it's been kind of hard for these players. Keep in mind, most of the time, there's always an aircraft at some form of battle rating, rather it be Russian, American, Chinese, that kind of completely dominates the cast. You start so low in BR too. Things like the Yak-9 that has APHE rounds dominates for the Russians. Things like the early Ayit for Israel. That's a scary aircraft. That's a terrifying aircraft if you run into that at 10-0. There's things like the American F4J VMF 232, which dominates at 9.3 with bullpups. Nothing else has that, minus like the Scimitar for Britain. And there's just so many examples of that, of aircraft that just outclass everything, and when in the right hands can wipe an entire ground team. The plane I've been using in this footage, the Su-25T, is a great example of that. This plane is literally armed to the teeth. You have 22 missiles for air-to-ground capabilities, depending on your loadout, depending on what you want to bring. It's a bit of a crazy plane, and that's absolutely capable of wiping an entire enemy team. Anyways, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you guys are not already subscribed, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Helps out the channel a lot. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.